have a diary entry from one of the English colonists to the United States, dated 1613. It says, "I will carefully avoid vain and needless expenses. I will diligently observe the Sabbath. I will keep my mornings free for prayer, meditation, and reading. I will flee idleness and worldly business. I will often pray with my wife." The historian, American historian Sarah Vowell links this to the end of The Great Gatsby, when they find, after Gatsby's death, they find his notebook. They turn to the first page and it says, "Get up early, exercise and study from 5 to 6 p.m. Practice elocution, poise, and how to attain it. Quit smoking and wasting time. Read one improving book or magazine a week. Be kinder to parents." And, if you went through my notebooks over the course of my life, you would find a lot of lists like that. Am I alone? Anyone else have a list like that lingering somewhere in your past? Yeah.
I think it was Ben Franklin who wrote in his notebook that one of his vices was vanity, so if he eliminated all his vices, he'd be proud of it and need to go back to the start.
Oh, I love that. I never heard that one before. That's a classic. All right, so this is obviously like pretty familiar to us. And the reason that I introduced these lists is because we're practicing insight meditation, Vipassana. And insight has two wings, they say, two parts. One is wisdom, the cultivation of wisdom, awareness of things as they are. And the other is compassion. And my experience with teaching has been that when I mention the compassion part, people tend to bristle. Anyone have that sort of feeling like, not compassion? And as is shown by the colonizer's diary and the great novel, a great American novel, the fear of compassion is one of our national legacies. I know I have religious scholars here, so you guys are probably way into what I'm saying. The American fear of compassion, to my mind, has two parts. The first one is the fear that care or compassion or kindness create need. Sort of one of the founding principles of this country is that the price of freedom is independence. If you don't depend on anybody, you don't need anybody, then you can enjoy freedom. And the opposite is also true. Every time you need another person, you lose a little bit of freedom. I remember teaching this to international students when I was teaching American culture to recent immigrants, and sort of explaining the freedom independence thing, which was often hard for them to grasp. And I remember a student saying, "Well, but do you feel free?" And there's also this idea that, welfare enables, right? If I give money to that guy, he's just going to spend it on alcohol, right? Or the more national idea, right? Like that if we support the poor, it's just going to encourage them to be lazy. It's a pretty deeply embedded national idea. So I think that's the first part of the fear, right? Compassion creates need, and need is both the opposite of freedom and also largely undesirable. And the second part to this fear is the fear that if I'm kind to myself, I won't get any better. Those same colonizers who began this country, in the Calvinist religion, there was a saying that if you didn't have anything to do, you should pile up a bunch of bricks on this side of the room and then brick by brick pile it to the other side of the room, because it was better to be engaged in labor where you weren't safe from idleness and laziness than to engage in rest where the devil might get in. We laugh at them, but I think a lot of us in a way really do kind of believe this. If I think of every time, I'm a therapist in my work and how often I hear people say, when I don't want to do things that aren't productive, I think of the bricks, right? This productivity is saving me from evil. I was sitting with a client this week, and she told me that one of the things she does that she doesn't like very much is that she eats too much, and what she eats, I feel like I'm gonna start crying. She eats too much, and what she eats isn't healthy. And that she was in the kitchen just wanting to eat, and her mother came by and said, "Get out of that kitchen." And the story I just told you isn't true. What actually happened is that my client was standing in the kitchen, and she said to herself, "Get out of that kitchen." And it's strange to me that the disgust we feel when we hear the first story is very different from the sort of relatable vibe when we hear the second story. Sometimes when I'm talking to myself, I think, if I heard that my friend's mom said this to them, how would I feel? But we're trying to prevent that evil, right? That's why we're talking to ourselves this way. We believe that if we allow compassion towards ourselves and then on the sort of national stage towards each other, we will unleash a monster, a needy monster. And so we say, I don't need anything. Or if we do need something, we deny it to others and to ourselves. I think the three biggest kinds of denial, like forms of denial that I'm familiar with are, I have no right to need this because other people have it worse than me. I only need this because I'm lazy. I only need this because I have no self-control. And even all the way back in the early Western psychology, right? Freud refers to these phrases as phrases of denial, a way not to cope with the fact that I need things, which is abhorrent. So we got this big fear. If I'm kind, especially kind to myself, I will unleash a monster. And there are two problems with this fear. The first one is that it doesn't work. If withholding compassion from myself made me awesome, I cannot tell you how awesome I would be right now. I would be so awesome, and so would all of you. If it worked to make a list and then to follow the list, we would all be incredible super versions of ourselves. But the truth is that it just fosters an internal culture that is not conducive to growth. When someone is constantly being like, get out of that kitchen, it doesn't encourage the person to get out of the kitchen. It never has. The other problem, which I start to feel icky when I talk about it, because I'm embarrassed that this is true of me, and maybe a little worried that it's not true of you, and that you guys are gonna think I'm gross, but I'm gonna say it anyway. The second problem is that if you set yourself up to be a virtuous spiritual person, and you cling to some ideas like, well, I don't accept help. I do it myself, I'm fine, thank you. Or ideas like, I would never do that. I don't know how some people behave that way. Or ideas like, well, I always give to a person who asks the first time and the second time and the fifth time and the eighth time, right? If you have these internal rules for yourself, inevitably, somewhere deep down, those rules are shoulds for others. No person says, I don't accept help and truly believes that it's fine for others to accept all the help they want. On some level, you feel that others should be doing what you're doing. So when you set up rules for yourself, you are making the rules for the people around you, and at the end of that road is a lot of resentment, right? If you have ever been selfless, right? If you've ever been in a role where you're being very selfless, and it's all about who you are, and like, no, I just give and give and give and give, and that's who I am. You will notice that over time, the person you're giving to, who is just receiving, you kind of stop liking that person, or your feelings about them get complicated. And you might say it in sweet ways like, oh, I wish so-and-so had the power to give the way that I do. Or you might say it in nasty ways like, so-and-so's never gonna get off their feet. But the rules you have for yourself are fundamentally the rules you have for other people. And that resentment and that distance, for me it's undesirable. I don't know what it is for other people, but it's also incredibly lonely. Holding yourself to a different standard than you hold other people is putting distance between you and other people. If you have to be good, the price you pay is that you can't also be human down there with the other humans. And that's suffering. So insight meditation invites us to take a look at our habits, at what we're doing, habits of mind and habits of practice, and see what's going on. I was at a retreat once, and I was in a small group meeting with the teacher, one of my favorite teachers, Brian Lesage. And there was an older woman in my group who had heard of a generosity practice, and she thought it was really beautiful, and she wanted to be generous to everyone. And so she was trying to practice generosity for people, so much so that she was burning herself out, right? She was generous to her husband, she was generous to her kids, she was generous to her friends and neighbors, she was giving. And she was heartbroken that generosity was making her so sad and angry and separate. And she told this to the teacher. And he said, where did you hear, that you need to be generous in this way? And she's like, oh, all the spiritual teachings say that it's good to be selfless. It's good to give of yourself. It's good to put yourself before others. And the teacher said, I don't think that teaching is for you. So remember, when the Buddha was teaching, he was teaching to a particular set of people with a particular set of problems, most of them men. And what they needed to do was be more generous, but it doesn't sound like that's what you need. And so one of the things I love about this tradition is the idea that some teachings are not for you, and that you need to go into yourself to find out which ones are and which ones aren't. So I'm saying a lot of stuff right here. Some of it might be useful to you, some of it might have nothing to do with you. Part of the practice is to say, does that feel like it's for me? Is that a thing that could be useful or meaningful to me? And if it's not, you let it go. The wisdom part is being honest about whether the teaching is useful to you. The compassion part is about acknowledging that you're a human being trying to do this, and that no list can save you. And I guess in some ways the bad news is no list can save you. And the good news is that means you're down here with the rest of us. Yay, welcome! We're so happy to have you. All the people who can't do their lists. Yeah! Good to be down here with us, practicing. So, in the insight tradition, how do we practice compassion? One part is the part that we've already been working on this class, which is notice, right? The moment where you get lost from being aware of the breath, you notice what pulled you away, right, is where you can learn everything you need to know about yourself. That sounds like hyperbole, but I think I really believe it. That's the moment, right? Because some people notice that they're thinking or like planning or wondering, you know, what they're going to do tomorrow, or rehashing a conversation that they would like to have with somebody they love when they're right and that person is wrong, right? Whatever it is that pulled you, right? When you get to that moment, you can say, thinking in a way that goes, oh, look at this human thinking. All right, back to the breath. Or you can say, thinking I'm never gonna get this, what the fuck is wrong with me? Right? There are two ways to respond to the fact that you've been pulled away from the task, and if you pay attention, you'll notice which one you are. Are you kind to humanness, and distraction is the most human thing that could possibly ever happen? Or are you cruel to it? What's your internal environment? And does your internal environment foster growth? I say this from experience. Years of sitting on my dumb butt going, oh, thinking. Seriously, thinking again, thinking, planning. Thinking, right? Years of that have gotten to me to the point where I respond to myself like, oh, human. And, you know, when that student asked me if I felt free, the answer was no. But now, it's yes. I do. Every time I screw up and I go, oh, look at you trying, I feel free. That's what the practice is offering. So as we return to practice, go back to watching the breath. A really nice place to gently put your observation is, how do I respond when I do the human thing? Because the human thing is coming. You are getting distracted. You are not going to sit here in perfect enlightened bliss until the end of the class, right? It's coming. When the human thing comes, notice how you respond. And if you respond like an asshole, have compassion for that. Oh, look at me, a human being an asshole to myself. There's nothing you can do in there that you can't accept the humanness of, which is a wise and useful practice. And this, sitting, is the boring part, right? This is where we sit here being like, more compassionate, more compassionate, more compassionate. But the great part is 3 days from now, when you're out there and you do something stupid, and rather than being like, I'm garbage, I need a list, you're like, whoa, what a person. It's freedom. It comes from practice. And since I've offered you nothing less than freedom, we should definitely practice, right?